What really stands out is just how long the crypto companies have been so focused on the primacy of power. The lack of sensitivity to latency has enabled them to have access to very cheap renewables, which is absolutely crucial. And this is something that is now crucial for a data center operators focused on AI.
Hello and welcome to Cool Vector. I'm David Snow, your host. And today we're joined by Paul Golding and Charles Yonts, both of Macquarie. Gentlemen, welcome to Cool Vector today. So great to have you here.
Great to be on with you, David. Thanks so much.
We are going to be talking about a fascinating topic, which is the historic connection between the crypto industry and the data center industry. Many players in the crypto space have transitioned into the data center business and been very successful in so doing. And of course, Macquarie is known all over the world for its expertise and leadership in all things infrastructure. So this can be a great conversation. Why don't we just start with what are some prime examples of companies that started in the crypto space that ended up succeeding in the data center space?
Sure. Thanks, David. There are three names that had their origins in Bitcoin mining and are now developing brownfield converted infrastructure to service ultimately a high-performance compute deployment by CoreWeave, their customer. Core Scientific, for example, a company that we cover, was the first major institutional Bitcoin miner to sign a hosting deal with CoreWeave, a well-known neocloud platform that we also cover. And Core Scientific's deal was what we called at that time a watershed moment, in so much as it was the first sign that Bitcoin miners and their power and bandwidth to deliver compute to the global Bitcoin network potentially had another use case, and to do so in a relatively more creative way than building a custom net new data center from scratch. And so I'll point to Core Scientific. In the crypto space, I'll also point to Galaxy Digital, which has a site in West Texas called Helios that has also signed a deal with CoreWeave. And then most recently, CoreWeave and Applied Digital have signed a deal to essentially deliver the same type of service.
Some of these companies have seen, like CoreWeave, just a huge run-up in valuation. To what do you attribute that?
We have seen fluctuations in valuation for some of these players, despite what's been quite strong perceived market demand for AI compute. We see hyperscalers competing to train increasingly more efficient models, better models. And in some cases, there has been concern that training more efficient models may actually diminish the demand for aggregate compute over time. But at least at this moment, the variety and breadth of generative AI applications are growing and needing compute. There's also the hyperscalers reselling of cloud services as a revenue line unto itself. The proliferation of AI compute through CoreWeave's signed deals is in a way consolidating this demand from both sides, from the side of hyperscalers, businesses where they're looking to develop applications and need the compute, and also from the side of hyperscalers, businesses where they are looking for capacity of this type of compute to resell at a profit. This has been driving valuation at names like CoreWeave and names associated with CoreWeave's deployment, namely the infrastructure players that are providing this power and bandwidth, although still subject to some Bitcoin fluctuations and the dynamics associated with the crypto cycle, so to speak.
Charles, you are head of ESG research for Asia for Macquarie. Why are you interested and why are you tracking the evolution and the connection between crypto and data centers?
I've been covering power and renewables as a stock analyst from across the region for the past 2 decades. And if we look at what is happening, of course, with power demand for data centers and the push for clean energy, that especially around this region, we see the hyperscalers driving. That is kind of the confluence of everything that I've been looking at. So this is what drew me to data centers in the first place, and really why I've spent the bulk of my time on them for the past 2 years.
Paul, what has been the key business model switch that has, allowed a company that calls itself crypto to then call itself a provider of data center services?
Sure, David. The global Bitcoin network is designed to yield a Bitcoin reward based on the amount of compute that is on the network. In other words, as more mining participants add compute capacity to the Bitcoin network, the difficulty goes up, requiring more power and yielding fewer proportional Bitcoin rewards per unit of power or unit of compute, unless miners continue to redeploy their capital, they will increasingly become diluted. That would theoretically potentially be offset by an increase in the value of Bitcoin. And so what is an off-ramp for this capital reinvestment cycle for these institutional miners that allows them to use this amassed power and concentration of physical infrastructure, as well as the fiber that runs through these sites, for a higher gross margin yielding revenue stream? It would be AI, because the demand there and the pricing of resold GPU hours allows for a reinflation of gross margin back to levels that were seen years ago in the Bitcoin mining space.
What were some innovations in power generation that came out of the crypto industry?
So when we talk about Bitcoin miners, the delivery of compute requires a high density of power at the rack. That high density has been historically far greater than what has been required of the traditional data center space. You may see 120 to 180 rack density in a Bitcoin mining data center in order to feed these ASIC miners with the power needed to outpace the growth in the global Bitcoin network. There's been interesting advances brought about by the Bitcoin mining space in terms of power management. Bitcoin miners can operate in pretty much any type of environment. The cold in Canada, the heat of Texas summers. Bitcoin mining data centers can partner with stranded power, renewables that have not had an interconnect set up yet to feed that power and sell it into the grid. They can be an offtake partner to these relatively remote facilities generating power. So Bitcoin mining has really innovated in that way in developing these renewables. The intermittency as well, and digesting intermittency and being able to still operate as an offtake partner. That, along with thermal management of the devices and thermal management of the electrical equipment in some of these very extreme climates, have been other aspects of innovation for that sector.
What is the significance of the fact that crypto companies, many of them were ideal customers for sustainable energy?
What really stands out is just how long the crypto companies have been so focused on the primacy of power. The lack of sensitivity to latency has enabled them to have access to very cheap renewables, which is absolutely crucial. And this is something that is now crucial for data center operators focused on AI. That flexibility in location is also something that we are seeing starting to play out across markets in Asia. So focus on power first and be willing to accept a location that isn't necessarily in one of the tier one markets like Singapore or Hong Kong. And in many cases, that cheapest access to power is renewables. As we've built up this training for AI data centers, we have the ability to have a longer latency. That really is a driver here, as it is in the States.
What is demand response and how is it relevant to the crypto story?
So demand response is the quick powering down of Bitcoin mining capacity in order for that power to be diverted elsewhere. The upside to those economics are then shared in future periods with that flexible load being the Bitcoin miner. Bitcoin mining can tolerate intermittency. When a particular region of a grid or a grid in its entirety is under strain, or there are dislocations in market pricing where supply is insufficient to meet demand for critical use cases like homes and businesses in the dead of summer in hot climates. Bitcoin miners are often enrolled with the grid operator as a potential flexible load where the Bitcoin miners can power down their Bitcoin mining operations. Many of them are able to, within 15 minutes of a particular notice from the grid operator, or simply at their discretion. And this demand response enrollment dynamic enables them to make a discount on future power, essentially sharing in the economics of more expensive power in high demand and low supply windows. When the grid is not stretched, they are basically consumers that raise the base demand and justify or enable the facilities generating power to exist in order to then deliver this power in critical times and divert it, essentially.
So it's the flexibility that allows some of these Bitcoin miners to enjoy cheaper energy because they can take a break from their activities, unlike many of the customers of data centers who need 100%.
5 nines uptime. It's that, and it's also just where they're sourcing it from, as we talked about before. Some markets like ERCOT and West Texas have a lot of stranded renewable capacity, renewables that have not yet gotten connected and able to sell their power to the grid that broadly is servicing demand centers on the east side of the state. Dallas, Fort Worth, Metroplex, Houston, Austin, San Antonio. And so when the power is stranded, something is better than nothing in terms of someone paying you for that power that's stranded.
The Duke University study came out late last year looking at the potential for incremental power availability to data centers if they were willing to involve some sort of demand response. And the numbers are extraordinary. It's nearly 100 gigawatts of spare capacity on the grid in the US, which is more than even the most bullish estimates have in terms of incremental demand from data centers in the United States by 2030. So roughly 100 gigawatts of extra capacity if the data centers were willing to cut themselves off from the grid for 0.25% to 0.5% of the hours. Now, of course, with 5 nines, they can't just shut off, but that does introduce the opportunity for them to take something behind the meter, like lithium-ion batteries or additional gas-fired generation.
What are people predicting about the future of the Bitcoin mining industry and its relation to energy going forward? Are there still going to be pure play miners or is there going to be so much blurring that it kind of becomes one kind of complex?
What we're seeing in our coverage universe is that there's a lot of blurring of those lines. What we're hearing and seeing from the industry is somewhat simultaneous concerted pivot towards incremental capacity being allocated or being marketed to HPC AI use cases and prospective customers.
Charles, what kind of energy providers do you think will win in the unfolding era of data centers, high capacity compute?
What is clear is that time to power is everything. And a year ago, it was kind of time to power, cost of power, and cleanliness of power. Today, it's time to power, and time to power. I mean, the short answer is those companies that are able to provide power quickly, whatever kind of electrons those are, will be the winners in this build out.
Charles, nuclear. Can you give us a summary of what does new nuclear look like, and how is that going to solve the challenges faced by the data center industry?
So nuclear, there are two parts, like you just said, new nuclear, or mostly small modular reactors, about which there are many announcements and a lot of news. This is great. It's very exciting. The reality is that the earliest any of these reactors come online, though, in the West is 2029, specifically a GE Hitachi in Canada. So that's good, but we will then have a period from that first reactor to come out, and there will be a handful that come out around 2029, 2030. The first ones are going to be very expensive. I think everyone should be aware of that at this stage. After those are proven, then you have the next batch. And where it really starts having an impact is the mid-2030s. Again, it's great. I'm very excited about all these prospects, and a lot of the companies are very interesting for sure. However, our demand visibility out into the mid-2030s is sketchy at best. That's the issue with small modular reactors or new reactors or fourth generation reactors. However, old nuclear is definitely interesting. A couple days ago, Meta had an announcement with Constellation that they were going to be extending the life of a reactor, Clinton 1 in Illinois, for 20 years, from 2027. There are still a handful of reactors that would be available for life extension and uprates in North America that would be open to potentially another hyperscaler or other data center operator to sign on, either life extensions or potentially another restart like we've seen with 3 Mile Island and Microsoft announced last September.
Let's move on to the Asia supply chain, and how it's not just the Asia supply chain, it's a supply chain for the entire world, and is critical to understanding how data centers anywhere get built, including in the United States. What should investors understand about what's going on in the Asian supply chain and how it relates to data centers?
The supply chain here is, of course, critical to things that are getting built out everywhere. On the power equipment, I think everyone is aware at this stage that there has been a shortage of transformers and of switchgear for data centers and for the grid and for everything else. That is global. It is especially pronounced in the US, especially with the uncertainty around tariffs. However, from the Asia side of things, we do see capacity being ramped up by, in particular, Hitachi for very high voltage transformers is the standout. HG Hyundai Electric from Korea would be the other one. There are a handful of other companies as well from Korea and Taiwan who are building up capacity in the US to shorten the lead times on transformers. But as it is today, it's still very much a bottleneck. So that's one focus. Other focus would be in the powertrain. So on UPS, the uninterruptible power supply systems and the batteries that go inside of them are largely from Asia, either the contract manufacturing here or the brands themselves. So like Delta Electronics would be the big one out of Taiwan. Same thing, there's less of a shortage there. They are ramping up capacity very aggressively. And then finally in the cooling chain. So as we do get into liquid cooling, where there has been a shortage, but they have been ramping up capacity substantially over the past 18 months or so. And we see a lot less of a squeeze on most of these components.
What makes you excited to be studying movements in the global digital infrastructure world? What makes it an exciting space to follow?
It's a great question, David. I think given how transformative the technology that this infrastructure could bring about could be for society and could be for the way that we go about our lives and work and advances for technology and humanity, it's really the center of how this new technological age can be delivered, this sort of industrial growth that comes along with this digital growth is what's most exciting and interesting. It's not just happening in terms of code. There's physical infrastructure and ingenuity that is also going to lead to innovation and efficiency around power use, fiber, and liquid cooling use cases for many other things. So those are the things that excite me about what's happening in this space and that I'm keen to continue watching.
Charles, what makes you excited to be part of the global energy, digital infrastructure ecosystem, and what's fascinating about learning about it on a daily basis?
And we really are seeing that very clearly in Asia, certainly, where the rush to get power, the push to get power quickly has pushed these very old-fashioned kind of traditional utilities and power people and kind of a sclerotic development plans into the future. So all of these ideas that have been on paper for a long time about co-locating renewables and reciprocating engines and batteries and virtual power plants, all of these things that probably utility and regulators would have been happy to push on and into the next decade or the following decade, they need to do it now. And this is really forcing them to. And we are seeing changes to policy in particular across Southeast Asia. And that is very much and very clearly driven by the data center build out. So that change to an industry that hasn't been changing for such a long time, and that is just incredible to watch. In addition to, of course, I mean, AI and the potential transformative effect, and also the geopolitical angle. It really is at the heart of all of the geopolitical complex, or many of those that we see around the region. So, it's incredible.
Yeah, the geopolitical, that's a whole topic that we could spend quite a long time on, but we'll wrap things up for now. I'd love to have both of you back. Thank you, Paul Golding and Charles Yonts from Macquarie, for sharing your insights with us today. I hope we can have you back on Cool Vector, and I really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having us on, David.
Thanks a lot, David.